The three most exciting things that I'm thinking about right now. One of them, at the historic Leonard Reed House, I see a lot of construction going on. I see a parking lot and a handicap ramp going in and a patio that you can see stakes where the construction crews have mapped out boundaries. That makes me excited because it shows me progress. It says that this is going to happen. And I'm so excited. But at the same time, that is the thing that frightens me the most, that we're really doing this, and I'd better be ready when it's time. Let me tell you about the historic Leonard Reed House. It was built in 1926 by Leonard Reed, who was one of those early pioneers in the African American community. He raised his family there. Leonard Reed worked with Colonel John Gillespie in the early years to map out golf courses, and he ran Colonel Gillespie's house. But anyway, that house was moved from its location at Cohen Way and 7th in the Overtown area to a new location, Orange Avenue and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Way. It was moved there because my organization is going to open an African American Arts, Cultural, and History Center. And that is so exciting. I am ecstatic about it. The earliest Black settlers came in search of freedom in 1812, and they existed in freedom until 1821. And these were the inhabitants of Angola. They were enslaved people in southern states, and they came here into Spanish Florida looking for ways to raise their families and practice their religious ceremonies and traditions without the hassle of being hassled. Okay, so they were the earliest ones. Next, we know about Jeffrey Bolding, who was an enslaved man from North Carolina who came here in 1857 trying to escape plantations in North Carolina. Unfortunately, he came here sick, hungry, frightened. The Whitaker family found him, and brought them into their home where he served that family. So from plantation as a slave to here in Sarasota working for the Whitaker family. Okay, some of the early Black pioneers. Lewis Colson, certainly, who founded the first Black church built by and for African Americans. Lewis Colson and his wife Irene, Leonard Reed, and his wife Eddie Coleman, also Neil Humphrey Sr., John Rivers. These were the people who um, did a lot to change Sarasota for African Americans because they came here. In the case of John Rivers, he came here thinking that Sarasota was going to be better than a town that he lived in Alabama, but he came here to find that it was just as bad or worse. And so he rolled up his sleeves and he got to working to change Sarasota. And so I mentioned Neil Humphrey Sr. and John Rivers because these were the early leaders that pushed for our equal access to public accommodations like the beach. And the beach story is a huge one for me. I interviewed Newtown elders, and they talked about going to integrate the Woolworth lunch counter. And a group of them would go in mass, not one or two, but a group would go together. And this was one of the stances that they took at the direction of the first NAACP president, Neil Humphrey Sr. Neil Humphrey Sr. would hold meetings in this very place, NAACP meetings, to plan those sit ins at the lunch counter. And so they talked about not being served when they would ask to be served. Walter Gilbert's mom shares her experiences about working in a downtown apparel shop. Black women could come into the apparel shop and they could select dresses that they wanted, but they could not try those dresses on in the dressing room. So how do you know that they're going to fit correctly? They didn't. But these were one of the things that they had to endure. Also, several of the residents I interviewed shared with me that they would shop in downtown, and if they wanted to go to the bathroom, there was no place to go because restrooms were not, at that time that they were shopping, open to African Americans. So sometimes they would have accidents because they couldn't go to a restroom. I do remember our NAACP president's father. Can I remember his name right now? He talked about getting up very, very early in the morning. He called it from can't to can't. And what did that mean? Couldn't see the sun when it came up and couldn't see the sun when it came down. That means from darkness to darkness, the long hours that they worked in the, and that he worked in the celery fields, just picking celery, processing it. There was a big plant out near Fruitville, and African Americans were out there in large part working. There are a lot of photographs uh, where you see them in various uh, jobs processing celery. Regarding the Rosemary Cemetery, there's only one African American couple buried there. That is Lewis Colson and his wife, Irene. That cemetery, white settlers were very upset about having to cross into Overtown to pay respects to their loved ones buried in the Rosemary Cemetery. And this was one of those push-pull factors that caused the Black community to be moved to the north side. There's actually an article about the disdain that white residents had about crossing that less than perfect, not so attractive in appearance Black community. When I grew up in this beautiful Newtown community, it was very, very tight knit, and everybody knew everybody. And I'm sure that a lot of the residents are sharing that. I don't remember Black and white only fountains. This was the environment that I grew up in. So I didn't go to a Winn-Dixie store to know that there were Black and white water fountains or restrooms. This is the community, this nurturing incubator. This is all that I knew. We had to have our own churches, our own businesses and shops, bike shops, grocery stores, dry cleaners. So the community was quite separate then, except when integration happened and we had to be bused to schools. So even though Booker Elementary School was right across the street from our home, I'd jump on a bus, a school bus, and be bused across town to Gulfgate Elementary School in South County. Do I remember white and Black restrooms at that time? No, I don't, because it was after the Civil Rights Act passed, which made things equal. Of course, we know that they were not equal even after the Civil Rights Act passed, but I didn't get to experience that. One of my greatest memories of growing up in Sarasota are the birthday parties that my grandparents would have in our backyard with neighborhood kids. We would all gather, and my grandmother would bake a birthday cake and have snacks, and we would all gather around and just have fun and laugh and dance. And I also enjoyed playing out in our backyard while my grandparents mowed the lawn and my grandmother would prune her roses. She worked as a domestic in the home of a woman who lived on Longboat Key. And this woman had exotic plants, and my grandmother was able to bring these plants and to our yard, and she would plant them. And so grandmother would be out there pruning and planting and all, and we would be running around uh, the yard, and my grandfather would be cutting our lawn, and they would put hot dogs on the grill. And that was the best thing, the smell of fresh cut grass and hot dogs. And we laughed and had fun. After our chores were done on a Saturday morning, the definition of segregation is separateness to me. Sarasota was absolutely segregated. As a little girl, I remember Dr. King was a hero. I could remember hearing snippets of his speech, the I Have a Dream speech. I can't tell you that I understood exactly what he meant and all that he was doing, but I could hear whispers of adults talking about civil rights. And sometimes the adults were afraid of what was going on. My grandparents were afraid of what it would mean to assert rights. You know, would it mean that we would be killed if we participated in activities that pushed for our rights? I could hear that as a little girl, but I do remember him being a hero and a leader. And when he died, I remember that day in my elementary school. Teachers were crying. Everybody put the television sets that we had, the few that we had, and maybe even it was a radio broadcast, come to think of it, but we were listening to the news of his murder. Teachers were crying. Everybody was crying. The community was in mourning. Imagine how little kids would feel seeing the adults in their lives reacting to a big old news event like this. We were sad too. Some horrible acts that we should talk about are the lynchings that happened in this community when Sarasota and Manatee County were combined. There were lynching. Um, that is an interesting story because I was documenting 100 years of African American history, and it never dawned on me to look into lynching history. I mean, this is a beautiful place, these beautiful palm trees, the beautiful bay and Gulf and all. No one had ever mentioned lynching until Brian Stevenson came and talked about his work with the lynching museum at Montgomery that he founded. And I was sitting there in Michael's on East, enjoying a beautiful dinner when he started talking about that. And that is what raised uh, my interest in finding about more lynching history. And I did find it. Gentrification, in my view, when people are shuffled and moved out of their community to make room for others who have more money, others who will put up coffee shops and trendy bookstores and cheese shops and businesses, and high-rise, expensive communities now replace the little houses that the original community had. And suddenly, everything gets better. You've got infrastructure fixed. You've got schools, crime decreases. All of the things that the African American community did not have, suddenly it improves when money comes in. Sean, I really don't know that we can name these three because some things have happened in our recent history that were a slap in the face to the African American community. And that is taking our African American history out of schools. That was a slap in our face. It said that you're not celebrated. Nobody was trying to make any child feel bad about what happened. African American history and recognizing it and celebrating it acknowledges that African Americans contributed. That's all that we'd like. And that's a part of, I feel, reparations that are owed to African Americans for what we have suffered: monuments, markers, podcasts, children's books, you name it, documentaries. These are the things that show that we're celebrated. CRT, critical race theory. What does it mean? It's confusing to me. I have no idea. As far as I'm concerned, it's a theory that a group of people put forth as some sort of political issue to divide us. And that is exactly what it has done. It's divisive and it separates us at a critical time. We don't want to be separated. We shouldn't be, but it has. Do I consider Sarasota segregated now? In some aspects, it is segregated. There are no laws that say don't go to a certain place or you're able to go to a certain place, but the vestiges of Jim Crow still exist in our community, in that African Americans don't feel comfortable in certain spaces because these spaces were not where they could go in the early years. And a lot of our young people have left this community in search of greater opportunities for work in larger cities. And so the older people are still here and they don't go. People like me, younger, and I still want to enjoy everything that Sarasota offers. And so I will go. And as a former news reporter here in Sarasota, I'm definitely going. The word community, it means people pulling together for the greater good of everyone. It means helping people who are less than. It means reaching out and caring. That is what Newtown meant to me and still means to many of us. Community. Sarasota can be more inclusive. It is an arts hub in the state of Florida. We can offer more diverse programming. Arts organizations can, and they have, and they're trying, and they're doing it more. But we need more. We want more diversity and more inclusion, and just the recognition of this history. African Americans built Sarasota's infrastructure. Few in Sarasota, white people, know that because everybody is from someplace else. But it was Black labor that built Sarasota's infrastructure. The railroads, the bridges, they cleared land on Siesta Key and Lido Beach and Longboat Key. My grandfather was one of those people that helped clear snake-infested land to open up development on those islands. And so a recognition of the work that these people did would go a long way in helping Black people to feel honored and celebrated. I'd like the future residents of Sarasota know the work of African Americans, the early pioneers who pushed for rights. And come to think of it, it wasn't just rights for African Americans to enjoy the beaches and public accommodations. It was the right for Black and brown and differently abled people who did not go along with or look like the people who were in charge at the time. We were pushing for everybody's rights. to be honest with you, I want future generations to know the sacrifices that my ancestors endured in order that they could enjoy a beautiful Sarasota. I am so grateful, and I cannot share enough gratitude and appreciation. And to be honest with you, I get misty. I get misty when I think about what they did. And I'm so happy that I now understand it. I didn't understand what they were doing at the time that they did it, but by golly, I understand it now. And I am committed to share these stories by any means necessary to make sure that Sarasota and surrounding communities understand what my ancestors did to make this a better community.